of the Polk County Board of Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, September 12th. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, are there any comments for items not on the agenda today? Seeing none, next up is Dr. Noelle Carroll, Health Services Director. Please come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I can read here. To choose between reading this and seeing you, that's where we're at. So, okay, well, you were asked, or I was asked to come over and just give you an update about where we were with different high-level topics with health services. So I've sent over a quick summary a couple of days ago. You should have in your packet just to follow along, but I'll be going through this for you. Before I jump in, is there anything in particular you're wanting me to highlight that I may not have included, or should I just circle back at the end and check in?
Just circle back.
Okay. So let's just start with behavioral health updates. I think the most timely issue to review is the current contract extension. So we are in the midst of extension 2 of 2. So we could not come to an agreement with OHA on contract language previously. So we did a 6-month extension in order to work on that language. In the midst of that, they had leadership change. So there was another extension in order to allow the new leadership to achieve the outcomes we all wanted. So you will be receiving, I believe tomorrow for consent, that second extension. We received it a few months ago. The reason it's gotten held up and we have been operating technically without a contract in good faith has been the conversation between us and OHA. Because when they did that, they were also pushing out large amounts of money for all the different service element changes they had made. And we had some question about whether the amounts were correct. So we wanted to make sure that we had the money that we were supposed to be getting and that was clarified in the contract before we sent it to you for signature. So that has now been established and is clear and we all agree. So that's actually coming to you, I believe tomorrow for signature, but we received it and it should have gone into effect as of July 1. So there's no concern that I have with that. And as I said, we've recommended it. There is some concern about what's going to happen at the end of this extension. So we should be rolling into then the end of this language negotiation period and signing off on an 18-month contract. We still don't have everything agreed upon within that though. And so some of the areas that we need to further negotiate, what we're going to accept, not accept is something I want to make sure that you're fully informed in and have a chance to have conversation at multiple levels before we get to the point of having to make a decision. So some of those, just to remind you, are language around subject to availability of funds. Historically, we understood that as the safety net, we were going to take responsibility for serving the community if there was not another provider of that service. It's kind of the behavioral health equivalent of emergency services. So crisis and some of those kind of high level services. And in the past, the contract said that they understood that we would provide those to the level that we were funded to provide those. They didn't expect us to go in over our heads on that. This most recent series of contracts that they sent out had that language removed. It simply said, you will provide this. So that was one of the areas that caused us to push back and say, we're not able to do this.
Am I correct in that these crisis services are not billable services?
Some of them are. It depends on a number of things. It depends on the type of coverage somebody has. We don't get to redirect people who are in crisis based on if they have insurance or the type of insurance or any of that. So we capture what we can through billings, but there's still a substantial amount that won't be funded and the state gives us money to cover that. We simply want to say, we will continue to do that to the level that you have funded us to provide that.
That's important. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so right now there's two other significant ways we're paid for those. If they happen to be a Pacific Source member, that's covered. If they happen to be a Yamhill YCCO member, that's covered. And then technically, if they had Open Card, which is kind of the state's version of an insurance provider, we can bill the state directly. But there's a large gamut of folks that fall outside that. The second issue that we're looking at is Around community restoration aid and assist, we've been talking about this for quite a while now, that we're seeing an uptick in the level of acuity. So they need more services and there's more of them coming into the community. So we're working with OHA right now, both on reworking how we're paid for that. Our proximity to Marion County puts us in an interesting position because it doesn't work to just pay like we do sometimes based on the size of the county and distribute it based on population. Because there's this pocket of folks getting released directly across the river from us that often end up coming to us for services just because of our proximity. So we're working with the state to rework how they have that methodology set up for funding. And then we're also working on liability language. We don't want the county to be liable for us having to restore somebody fully if that's not something that we think is reasonable and that's not something that we have agreed to take on. So we're talking with the state still about trying to get language in there that says we will do our good work within best practice and we'll make the recommendations clinically of what needs to happen, but that's all that we can reasonably do. And there needs to be some way for us to be able to protect ourselves after that point.
I'll sort of interrupt, but do we have good data on number of folks in community restoration now and over time?
I could get that to you.
Okay.
Is it good data? It depends on what you mean by that. I think that the laws as they change bring in and exclude different sides of that. And so is it the same consistent population over time so that we could really follow trends? I'm not sure that you would have it completely clean.
Okay.
Okay, so those are the contract updates. I'll just pause there if there's any questions about that or a discussion you want to have at this point. Like I said, hopefully the last extension will be coming through tomorrow. I will state that I do have a concern about the timeline. The meetings are still ongoing with the negotiation around the language concerns that we have, and they don't even have the next meeting scheduled until the end of this month. I am concerned that we're going to end up in November, December, seeing something we still don't like, and we will then have to decide if we're willing to go without a contract or what. So
who's in the negotiating team?
the negotiations right now include the chair and vice chair of AOC MHP, along with Cheryl Ramirez, and a group of county council that's been assigned to represent the issue on behalf of the counties. Morgan, I don't know if you have any more information about specifically who that is.
It's
Brad Anderson.
Brad Anderson
and-
from Washington County, Eric Blaine from Crook County, and I believe there's a third possibly from Lane County.
And is there any kind of notes or any kind of tracking of that negotiation
At this
that
point,
they distribute to you so that you know what the details are of the discussions?
to some extent, the most recent update, I've nearly taken verbatim into points 1 through 3 here, and that's the extent of what I have.
That's pretty dismal.
I'm less hopeful than I had wanted to be.
I mean, how many $1 million, excuse me, how many millions of dollars are we talking about statewide here? Yeah, I mean, do you have any sense of that? I'm doing this for the perspective on the record.
I don't. It would be significant,
Hundreds,
most likely.
hundreds.
Yeah, many tens, if not hundreds. Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like I'm in a vacuum here on these discussions. Most significant portion of Polk County government's delivery system, largest revenue, largest expense, biggest negotiation for any department in our county government. And I appreciate the work you're doing, and I also appreciate the frustration of what you've been going through and the unknowns. But I'd like the commissioners to get everything you get with regard to this, and whether they read it or they don't read it, it's not my concern. But I think that we should have access to it because I've been asking these questions for quite a while, and I haven't seen any direct communications about what these people are doing, and they're representing me. And I'm interested to know what their conversations are. We're not getting it through AOC. So I'd like if there's any way that we can get updates, and I'm trying to encourage other commissioners around the state, pay attention here. Get involved in this. They don't, as a rule, sorry. but that's just how it is. And they should be paying attention to this. Again, huge impact to every single county in this state. And the implications of doing this negotiation wrong and entrusting this negotiation process to people that aren't hearing anything from me is problematic in my view. So, I mean, we can't afford for them to make a mistake on our behalf. So, and of course, at the end of the day, we have the full right and capability of rejecting it. But it'll be easier for us to understand what we're agreeing or not agreeing to when we get to that point, if we've been kind of following along. So that's what I'm looking for right now, is just to have a little bit more update information about what's actually being discussed. What's the state trying to push? Again, come to the issue of subject to availability of funds issue. We've been arguing over this for a long time, and it makes perfect sense for us as a sub to continue to hold on to that and continue to press back on the state. Say you're not going to force these things on us. It's well beyond safety net coverage, well beyond. So anyway, I just want everybody to be as educated as possible when we get to the point where we have to say, because we're making decisions for our capacity for the future. And I'm editorializing a little here. I apologize for that, but I think it's important for the public to know how big this is, how dramatic this is. And it's their money that we're using here, that we're talking about. And again, commonly Medicaid, Medicare funds, but by the same token, we've got just a handful of people making these decisions, mostly at state level, and pushing us into these places that aren't sustainable. So anyway, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yes, no, and you're exactly right. It is incredibly important and could be very impactful to both the county department and the services we're able to provide, and what the county's position is on providing those at all. So I absolutely bring it forward for that very reason, and I will pass through anything that I get related to it. In better news, we have some program development that we're doing that I think is very important and exciting. We received jail reinvestment initiative funds that we have been working with LIPSIC to determine how to invest. And at this point, we have submitted a grant, which we've been told should be funded shortly without any issue. And those funds are going to be used to do a couple of things, primarily for the jail, who has been struggling with having a large percentage of inmates who are struggling with mental health issues and not having providers on site to help with that. So in addition to the one therapist that we have placed in the jail historically, we're going to be adding up to 12 hours a week of psychiatric services, primarily to serve people who either enter the jail on medications that need some kind of ongoing evaluation and monitoring, or to potentially get somebody who's not stable due to a mental illness on a medication before they then exit the jail back into the community. So we're going to be implementing that shortly, as well as providing some additional support in the form of a case manager to make sure that folks, as they transition out of the jail, are connected immediately, both to Medicaid, if that's something that they're needing, or to the services that we have in the community to support them. So they'll be assigned to them prior to their release and walk them through whatever they need to get connected to in the community to help support that stable release.
Could I just fill in something?
Absolutely.
The reason why we're getting grant funds for this is partially because folks lose their OHP enrollment if they're on OHP prior to incarcerated or being in jail. Once they're in jail, correct?
That is one of the things that we're trying to fill the gap for. Yeah, there is no ability for us to get paid for services done in the jail. So we have to use grant funds. Thank you for that clarification. Our BERN, which stands for Behavioral Health Resource Network, which came out of Measure 110, is slowly getting off the ground. We're providing services to folks who have concerns about substance use issues that might not otherwise be coming into treatment. So we're able to provide some screening, some referral, some access to those services if needed. At this point. It has been kind of a slow transition to get the program up and going because there's a significant burden related to data reporting and how things have to be tracked and how things have to be designed, which has been a significant cost to redesign of our electronic health record and the specialty that we need for people to track all of this information. So we do have some folks in place now. We're beginning those services and it will probably be fully implemented before the first of the year.
You have many people signed up for that as of yet?
Oh, yeah, we've been doing services for a few months. I think there's just quite a broad spectrum of services that can be provided. And so you have to have different types of service providers ready to go to do that. So we've had some hiring issues that have slowed that down. We've had some people move around out of one specialty into another that slowed that down. So, but yes, there's a significant amount of services that are happening, just not the full spectrum to the extent we want yet.
What's your reporting process? So your folks reporting to you how much money they're receiving for this program and how much they're spending, how much staffing, and then how many, what the outcomes are. What are you getting?
What am I getting from our folks? So what we're doing is when the funds are received, we're going through an allocation process of what types of providers we're putting that money towards to pay for those positions. So we're tracking that on a monthly basis. We're then using our electronic health record to track the individuals that come in that qualify for the services and how many folks we have screened to determine if they qualify. So that information comes in a monthly basis. And then we're beginning to calculate, and this is where it took us a while to get to this component. There's a quarterly report due to the state that really breaks it down into much more granular detail about what particular thing did they need and what particular referral did you make. And some of that is still coming on board, as well as what is the equivalent cost associated with all of those various services so that we can then compare kind of what the cost would be to the dollars that we're getting that don't come through billings. Some of these can be covered with billings. The funds that come through this program are intended to be funds that are used as a last resort for somebody who has no other coverage option. Otherwise, we're hooking them up to things that have a payment source.
Is it possible? I know this is an ask for extra work, but is it possible? Because we're having conversations about Measure 110. So this is attached to that, in my view. Again, we don't have, as a board, any reports on here's what we spend, here's what it costs, here's how many clients we have, how many we're predicting.
Mhm.
And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, we should have some understanding of how much money we're spending, cost per individual. Don't want to know the individuals, just, but it would be nice to know the numbers. You know, got folks out there touting these burn programs as being a good thing. And again, I get that it's slow, but getting off the ground, but we should understand it. Again, we don't know the numbers, we don't see it. And I think that it's important for us to understand what are burn dollar impacts in Polk County. So
I'd also be curious to how you get them into the burn program. Are they referred? Do they walk in?
It's intended to be low barrier. So and by that, I mean, somebody should be able to do any of the above and more. So what right now happens is somebody can be referred from anybody in the community, whether that's an agency, an entity, or an individual, can call and say, hey, I have concerns about so-and-so, and we can reach out and invite them to be screened or inform them of services that we have available. They can call, they can walk in, any of that is fine. And then we're also reaching out to folks who come to us naturally through other avenues that we provide a screening that will identify somebody who might also be available for this set of services. And we're following up with folks as we see those come in.
not coming through the courts, though.
Anybody who came, nobody that I'm aware of is being, you mean as far as the original violations that were going to come through this?
I guess I'm asking for, is there a compulsory element to these people coming in the door, or are they just strictly on their own?
There's a compulsory element within the program. We have not received anybody who has come in through that vein. So somebody who's cited, and I'm not completely familiar, I'm just going to admit I'm not the expert on this, that's more of Jennifer, but somebody who's cited, my understanding is that they can then get that either set aside or reduced as far as any kind of penalty if they go through the process with us to do the screening and to follow up on any recommendations we have. And then there's a series of forms that we have to fill out and file back with the court and send back to the state to track that when that happens. We have not encountered any of those at this point.
I'll have more questions later,
Okay.
not today, but as we go forward, specific to this process.
And I can begin to give you the data that we have on burn. As I said, some of this we're still, as the rest of our counterparts around the state are all trying to deal with reporting requirements that I think were designed with good intention without understanding of how data metrics work and how our workflows work within a county environment. So some of it has been difficult to create quickly.
I imagine since the funding wasn't released until June of last year, there's a lag between when you can actually offer services to the public and when, you know, you receive the funds. So watching this over time will be interesting too. Pretty early to assess things in my view.
I think it's very early. Most of the public is not even aware that this exists as a resource. So that's definitely impacting the number of takers. A quick note on OHP membership and redetermination. There is a sheet that was included in your packet that quickly shows the membership as of July for Mary Polk CCO. It's a little over 140,000 people. 15% of that is usually where we hover around that are Polk County residents. So right now that membership is hovering just above what was budgeted. And the reason that that's important is that there's a number of our services that we receive funding based on the number of members enrolled. So as that membership number increases and decreases, we're getting a, penny percentage of money to support a population for these various services. So right now we are ahead of what was budgeted. However, with redetermination coming or in process of that now, there's expected to be a decrease to that membership, and the numbers honestly are all over the place as to what the impact will be. We're just simply keeping an eye on it. We've been prepared for this to happen for 2 years. So I'm not concerned. I'm just watchful and will adjust accordingly.
There's a lot of messaging from Pacific Source to service integration everywhere. So hopefully we capture as many as possible.
Yeah, there has been a lot of effort trying to help people walk through it. We have people that can assist people sign up if they don't understand how to do that or get the redetermination through.
That's another question. I'm sorry, this is more like it's turning into a conversation, which I think is a good thing. Do you have any general explanation? And don't even worry if you have data to back it up or not. But so the 15% versus 85% Polk and Marion, is there a reason why we're underrepresented with the overall population between the two counties? Do you think that's just less eligibility folks per capita in Polk or
Population,
well, no, but
significant population difference.
right, but the population if it was by population, we'd be 25%,
Right.
75%. So we're at 15%, 85%. So I'm curious what explains the.
I'm quickly trying to think through the different populations and if there's something that stands out to me immediately, and there's not.
Yeah, okay, no worries.
Yeah,
That's okay. I'm just.
I
curious,
have
something to
my-
think about.
potential rabbit trails that I would follow to go look into that,
Yeah.
but nothing that I
Okay.
have confidence in.
That's fine. I figured that. I'm just curious. Thanks.
Yeah, and if you are curious, I did provide a link to you that you could go to the state website on what's happening with those membership rates.
Okay.
In developmental disability services, after the last legislative session, we received an increase according to the workload model that has been the way of doing business that they've had under analysis for the last couple of years. So we've received an increase there that will allow us to add 2 more service coordinators as well as some administrative support. We're looking at an increase of approximately 700,000 annually. So that is good news, particularly when we are already over the enrollment that was anticipated when they set this rate for us. So we already have more business than what they funded at the start. But we have an excellent team within that program these days, and the leadership is stellar, and they are monitoring this constantly and keeping us well ahead of the mark. So it's good news that we're able to actually provide a little bit more support. And within public health, Two things I wanted to highlight there is that they are beginning a naloxone distribution project with opioid dollars. So we'll be doing that. It's a collaboration between public health and behavioral health, but public health would be the one to actually track and hold medication. So what we're going to be starting with is there are a number of areas within behavioral health where certain staff people are required to receive training and to have naloxone accessible on them during the course of their work. So folks like crisis workers, our substance use counselors, folks like that. And then in the past, when we had some funding for this, we also supported the sheriff's department, who also needs access to that. So we would also be looking at rolling them in our first wave of partnership so that we can support their needs in that area. And then we will slowly look at other partners that we can add in as it looks like we have funding and capacity to do that. So that's coming off the ground right now. And the most exciting thing happening in public health for us is the home visiting programs that have been offline for the last couple of years due to staffing issues are now fully staffed and are coming back online in the next month or so. So we'll be adding a significant amount of services back to public health that we have not been able to offer. So, and that honestly, the difference maker in that seemed to be the commitment bonus that we were able to offer the registered nurses seem to make the difference on our hiring. So thank you for approving that for those positions.
That's huge, given the deficit in available RNs
Yes.
across the state. It's great.
Okay, that concludes the highlights that I wanted to bring forth. Any other things that I can answer for you?
How are you doing on staffing overall?
I think we're doing better than some and not as well as others. And it depends on the department and the area and the type of staff. That we still struggle with professional level staff being able to be competitive. I don't know that we're not. I don't even know at this point, honestly, what the market rate would be interpreted as. But we have people that are leaving regularly for considerably larger pay structures. And again, we always talk about that, the making choices. There's certain things that you get with a position like this that's not available if you're out on your own. So it really depends on what they're valuing and what they're trying to find for their lives and their families.
We're seeing some workforce pipeline expansion across the state too. Of course, we won't feel the effects of that for quite some time. And hopefully we get more bodies statewide. But I'm hearing that we're seeing less people interested in became HPs and I don't know if that's true or that's just conjecture, but
I've seen data recently that suggested that fewer people were coming into the field, at least at that level of the profession. So I think where our paraprofessional positions sit, that are more easily to obtain and utilize people that have more lived experience, we're still doing fairly well with recruitment in those areas. What we're seeing there is a high turnover due to burnout. So we're focusing on how to build resiliency within those positions, how to help them really establish good boundaries for themselves personally so that they can do the hard work and still take care of themselves. And in our professional positions, I think it just comes down to if somebody needs the money, they're able to get positions that pay 2 to 3 times more.
appreciate it. Any other question?
Yeah, I just want to circle back to the first item in the in tomorrow's packet, just to validate this contract extension. The contract amount, it states in this, is $1.729 million. Is that, I just want to make certain that I'm clear on that. Is that the total amount? I mean, what I read it as is, it is the amendment. It's the added element to the contract. How much is the initial contract itself? Do you know?
That probably is the initial contract amount. What I'm not clear on is if that's been parceled down for a 6-month period. So if you're looking at that annually, double it. What gets interesting these days is the money that is being retained by OHA and the things that they're pushing out to different entities. The main entity that impacts us being the CCOs. So there's still program areas that the state has withheld that they have started to turn over to the CCO. And so the money then moves from this contract into that CCO contract. And that is been shifting for the last few years. So the more substantial funding that we receive is coming through the CCO than through the state contract. But the precedents for how those services are to be delivered end up within this. This drives then what the CCO is responsible for passing downstream. So there's a lot of delegated services that start with what's in here. So it's been the money is of less concern than the implication, the liability. What are we actually asking to be on the hook for than the dollars that are sitting within that contract?
Well, I just want to reiterate to you that I'm reading these contracts much more carefully than ever before. And we just recently have had a situation where I've said, we shouldn't be signing one. And so it's, I think, incumbent on your department to find a pathway to educate us more and more, because this one, for example, again, I'm not sure if I'm signing an amendment for $1.7 million. I'm not sure if I'm signing an amendment for a contract that exists at $1.7 million. I mean, I've scanned through the 20+ pages of this and looked at the responsibilities. It isn't very clear to me, what I mean, again, it's the board chair, but I'm going to have to say yes or no to it. And I am concerned that we don't fully understand it, and it's just a matter of logistics and training. And I get that, and again, I have an administrator who's not here, but says, oh, it's just business as usual. Well, it's not business as usual for me. And so this is an odd time. It's been evolving over my 13 years. And so it's becoming more nuanced, more challenging for me to keep track of it. And I have to be responsible as an elected official for what we're signing. So you're going to hear more from me about what is this? Why am I being asked to sign it, especially when it comes at the 11th hour? And again, I know you've heard all that from us. And again, I get that there may be some challenges with the state, but I don't care. We need time to understand it. And because it has implications for our future, we're signing on to things that will make commitments that we might not be able to fulfill.
Right.
So that's where I'm at right now. I want to better understand. And so that means we have to have a better line of communication from your department to help us, as this is very complicated. And again, this is one of those places where I've told Mr. Hansen and others, if I were stopped on the street by somebody who was monitoring these meetings and they asked me, what is it you just signed? I'm not sure I can answer that in a really positive way a lot of the time. So it takes a lot of time for us to drill down through this and to understand the best we can what these contracts are. But at the end of the day, this body is responsible for signing those, and we need help. I think as a board, just to get updated on what it is we're doing, what we're signing. So that's why I'm pushing back on some of them as I go through them and I see the dollar amounts. I mean, if they're small ones, as a rule, I scan through them, but they're not, and they're just small amendments, but this one's big. And I wonder why right now in September, we're seeing an amendment to a contract that, again, that contract I'm guessing is a couple of years old.
The original contract?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is it says it's number 11. So it's been amended multiple times, obviously.
Yes, and sometimes the amendments are simply a language change within a service element. So they can be extremely granular, or they can have some significant impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And without reading every page and trying to understand all that, and I don't expect that you do either, but I'll bet you have somebody that does understand, I hope. But I appreciate that there is a contract review sheet, but it's pretty short with regard to explaining to me what this really does.
And that might be an interesting place outside of this, obviously, for us to explore. How do we change maybe the formatting of that or expand upon that with some of these larger issues?
Yeah, and we need to
I'm
have it
very happy to
in
do
enough time for me to be able to, I'm just talking for myself, to be able to actually read it or review it. When it comes the day before a consent calendar, that won't work.
I agree, Commissioner. I appreciate you raising these concerns. And when you say we get these at the 11th hour, we're literally 2 months past
Yeah.
the working, and we're working under this contract in good
Right.
faith, and we're asked to approve something retroactively. And I think there'll be a good opportunity, hopefully, with the next 18-month contract that starts January to really take a little more time. Of course, you can't control by yourself
Right.
the timing of these, and you know, Health Services Steering Committee, AOC, we do get updates there, but that could be an opportunity for us to kind of push back on some of the process. I think here too, it really is unfair, and there are risks in the system given the lack of leadership right now at OHA. So I think Cheryl's doing a great job, and everybody is doing a great job, but I feel that risk too, that I don't quite have full knowledge of. So appreciate that.
Same.
Thank you, Noel.
Yeah,
Thanks for
absolutely.
everything. Okay. Back to this agenda. Any non-listed items we need to consider before we adjourn the regular session here? No. All right. Hearing none, I believe we have a need for an executive session today.
Yes, sir. The board will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192-660 sub 2N to discuss information about